Hello again. So here we are on the fourth and final episode of our Jungle Ruins painting. I hope you had a chance to see the last three episode installments. And on this episode, what I want to start working on is completing our foreground in the shadow region. We'll work on our jaguar. This is going to be a dark pigmented jaguar. They're kind of rare. I looked them up. They have about 11% of the population comes black, so I thought that was pretty cool that we could add maybe a black jaguar here. We'll finish out the trees. We'll bring in some of the other jungle growth, so should be a lot of fun. So please subscribe and click your likes, click your alerts, make your comments. I appreciate all of those. Appreciate your support. And let's go ahead and get rolling. Let's go over the colors we're going to be using on our palette. We're using these Windsor Newton Griffin Alkyd oil paints. They're fast drying oils. I enjoy using these. We've got titanium white. We've got ivory black, French ultramarine. I'm going to use some phthalo green. Permanent sap green. We've got Windsor lemon, and we've got burnt umber. So I apologize, we're kind of jumping into this video a little bit later than I had wanted to originally. About a month's gone by since last time I posted episode 3, and now getting into episode 4. During that time, I had a commission painting come in, and I had to go ahead and put this painting away for a while so I could focus on that commission work. So now that that's been completed, it's been packaged and shipped off, I can come back and focus on this painting once again. So now that we've moved into our oil palette, I'm going to go ahead and just start to add a little bit more detail now to these flagstones here in the shadow. And I wanted to I guess just pay special attention to really focusing on using cool colors. I'm using cool blues and grays and purples. And I'm just trying to kind of work this area, give it a little bit more detail. One of the things that I've made mistakes on in the past, when I'm working in the shadow regions, I wouldn't put enough detail into the shadowy areas, and they were just far too dark. And so I've learned over the course of time that you can still add a lot of reflected highlights, and you can add shadow and deeper shadows within the shadows, but just by pulling out a little bit more detail, bringing in a little bit more highlight colors, that'll really help to really establish your darker shadow regions in your painting. And so that's kind of what I'm working on here now, is I'm really just starting to augment this section here in the foreground and bringing in a little bit more interest, creating pebbles and additional cracks and rocks and things of that nature. And so I've just mixed together this blue-gray, which is just a mixture of burnt umber, ultramarine blue, a little bit of dioxazine purple, and keeping a little bit more on the blue side though, and that's kind of the mixture I'm using. Now working into these little tufts of grass, I'm just keeping again that bluish hue to my green. So I'm still using the phthalo green yellow shade, and keeping a lot of blue into that as well, and that'll keep it nice and cool, and I'll still give it the indication that we're still in the shadowy areas here. And so we don't want to create too much highlight, but there'll be a little bit of highlight here and help it a little bit of separation. Now I'm just using my angle brush. You can get these brushes, the head of the bristles nice and razor sharp, and it works just as well as if I were using a rigger brush. Plus I can keep the paint a little bit thicker and really help it to really kind of pop out. So I'm going to just kind of join the shadow into the lighter highlighted area of our foreground here, and creating this kind of clayish dirt sort of area here. It's kind of bare and worn from any sort of grasses, and just kind of tie the two together here. And I'm kind of repeating exactly what I did in the shadow area, except I'm using my kind of gold yellowish colors now. So I've mixed phthalo yellow, phthalo orange, a little bit of yellow ochre, and some titanium white, and that helps me to kind of achieve this nice creamy light color. And so I can just come back in and add a little bit more detail into this region and really kind of help this area to sort of pop a little bit more. But I'm really kind of localizing it here in the center of the painting. I don't need to do this throughout the entire area here in this kind of foreground bare kind of dirt region. I kind of want to just kind of keep it localized in the center. This will help again to kind of draw the eye to where I want it to be drawn, more toward focal points and into the center areas. And so that's kind of the method to the madness. So I'm just using my number 1 round brush just to kind of get this added in. So went ahead and added in the silhouette of the jaguar here. We're gonna have another jaguar. In episode 3, I demonstrated painting in the first jaguar, and the second one, which is going to be sitting in the shadow area, I wanted it to be a black jaguar, so kind of a darker fur, and so I'll be kind of demonstrating putting that one in, but I wanted to work kind of the area around his body first before I got into that. So using my tree and texture brush, and I've mixed up kind of a purple, dark purplish blue, almost like a sort of a lavenderish color, and just stippling on these tiny little dots all over his body, and this will start to simulate fur. Now the thing about fur, especially if it's not long fur, you don't need to go in and paint every single tiny little strand. It'll take forever, probably won't look all that good. But if you go ahead and just stipple on most of that region, you can come back and create little fur strokes, but not having to go all out, just a few here and there. That'll really save a lot of time. I think you'll like the result a little bit better. So I'll just come through right now and just spend a little time with this tree and texture brush and stipple on the highlights, stipple on the shadow areas, and just kind of build on this thing. And that's really the goal here. Just like I demonstrated in episode 3. If you've not seen that yet, I hope you can go to my channel and check out that video. This is a 4-part video on this painting titled Jungle Ruins. And so if you get a moment and you've got a little bit of time, a little bit of boredom, maybe you can check out those videos. So now I can come back with this rigger brush using my Midnight Black and really start to define the mouth and the nose, get the eyes in, and just kind of really figure out where everything's going to sort of reside here early on. We'll get that kind of built in, and then we can start to work around the face and into the body. But just want to get this established here first. I did I did add this in with a charcoal pencil earlier, and now I'm just sort of drawing it back out since we've done the stippling, which has covered a lot of our charcoal guidelines, and just bring that, back in once more. And this is just a matter of patience and time. And I've talked about this before. I do a lot of stippling to add additional detail. It's great for trees, it's great for rocks and stones, dirt paths, it's great for fur. It does take a significant amount of time, and it'll just take time to kind of get used to it too. You want to make sure that the brush is very splayed out properly, and you don't want it to be too wet, but you don't want it to be too dry. So you're just kind of looking for something in the middle. And when I'm stippling here, I'm just using liquid to kind of thin it, and that liquid will help it to be transparent, and it'll help it to be more of a glaze. It'll also help it to dry very quickly. And as you stipple that on, that doesn't really change much the underpainting. You want to have a lot of the underpainting show through. What it does do is it kind of tints that underpainting. And that's kind of the effect that I'm looking for here when I do this. So now we've got a little bit of silver lining. I've just mixed some ultramarine blue and white, create a nice pale bluish hue here. And we're going to just have a little bit of the light kind of poking through here and having some reflected highlight. But what you want to really do is just pay attention to your negative space. You don't want to kill the underpainting. It's going to really work in your favor. So you just want to be subtle with your paint. Subtlety's been something that I've been working on. I love very subtle, smooth, soft transitions in colors, transitioning from darks to lights. And I've had a problem with subtlety in the past where I just was too abrupt and brought it in too quickly. And so just having a little bit of patience and discipline, you can just bring in that subtlety. And that's kind of what my goal has been, that I've worked on and trying to work on, is just improving that, so that you don't really offend the viewer too much. And so that's just been one of my goals. So I've changed my brush over to this tiny little round brush that's an older brush. I've kind of worn the head of the brush down and really splayed it open, and I can get a little bit more accuracy with my brush strokes, and that's kind of why I kind of moved to that brush. Now with the eyes, I've mixed together phthalo yellow and dioxazine purple, since they're complement colors. The purple coming in helps to kind of desaturate that yellow, but keeping it more on the yellow side. And then I can come back later with some Windsor lemon, and I can really cause those eyes to pop just by adding a touch of paint to the corner of the eye. And that's a good way just to really cause those eyes to kind of jump out at you with this dark jungle cat. So now I'm starting to kind of come to a point here where I can add some of these kind of final little details I wanted with the underpainting here. I got to get this all established because we're going to be coming back and adding in all the different stripes or dots, I suppose, but the pattern in the fur here, these jaguars, they just have these beautiful patterns, these dark patterns in their fur. So first trying to get the whole underpainting where I kind of want it, then I can go back and start bringing in those extra little patterns, and then I can finish that off here pretty soon with another glaze where I can darken some of my shadows up a little bit better, and we'll be done. So, but the cat's really coming along. This has just been layer after layer that I've been adding and kind of jumping around, bouncing back between the shadows and the highlights here in the fur, and keeping a lot of that stippling to give that illusion that we've got this fur. And now I can come back now and start adding in all the patterns here. I'm just using Midnight Black, and that's all I'm using here. Going around now and starting to bring in those beautiful patterns. So working, these animals just takes time. These are in the foreground, so they're going to be a prominent feature in the painting, and they're here in the foreground, so they're real close up. And I wanted to just be a little patient here and bring these all in a very nice detailed way to just add, a little bit more interest to our painting here. Okay, we're kind of coming close here to the end of painting in our cat now. I wasn't even sure I was going to even share this in the video since I'd already painted the first jaguar, but I just figured it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and demonstrate it one more time. There may be some of you that only watch this video. You perhaps not going to watch the entire 4 segments. So just by presenting it a second time, that may be beneficial to some of you watching. So as I let this come in, I'm going to let this dry. This is, again, I'm using the Alkyd oil paints. They do dry pretty fast. I can give them about a day, and they're usually dry to the touch. I can come back here tomorrow and bring in my final glazes on top of our cat, because I just want to really bring in a little bit more detail with the shadowing. That's going to really help to cause the cat to look pretty three-dimensional. So I've mixed a glaze now. This is the next day. I let that cat dry. The ground around him's dry as well, so I can make this glaze. And I've mixed together blue and umber and a little bit of Midnight Black together with liquid, created a nice glaze that's very transparent. And I'm creating now the shadows around his body, the cast shadow from his body, since the sun's coming in from the left side. And now I can really start to bring in shadowing around his body. Now this is where I'm just taking a small little flat brush and I'm just glazing on this extra dark color around him. This is pretty typical for me. You've probably noticed I've done this in past videos, but it really helps to establish, I think, getting that three-dimensionality a little bit better, and just getting a little bit richer, bolder color to our animal here. And so that'll more or less finish off our jaguar. We can start pushing into the rest of the foreground. But I wanted to get this added in first because we're going to start to build the primary foreground in, and it'll push in front of him, which will cause him to be seated and kind of push him a little bit back a little bit more. And so just by bringing that in now, then we can start to build up and around him. Add a little bit more blue to my glaze. I kind of added a little bit more blue to his face, a little bit of reflective highlight, and start to kind of reestablish some more of those dark regions here now. So it's just kind of a matter of going back through and kind of playing with it a little bit. This is my final detail and refinement stage with our subject here now, and that's kind of where I am, is just that final little segment. So I'm just adding a little bit more to his eyes now and kind of helping, getting a little bit more light yellow just to cause those eyes to pop. And now I can bring in the whiskers. So using my little rigger brush, I've just added a little bit of very pale blue paint that I've mixed, and we can bring in those little whiskers, and that'll sort of kind of finish off our cat. So now I can start to work on the primary foreground. I'm just using pure black and going to start to create a little bit of shrubbery and get some ferns, get some other jungle plants started, to paint into this area right now. And I want some of this definitely to go in front of our cat. Again, that'll really help to push him back. Don't be afraid to ever paint in front of anything. It always looks funny when I see paintings where you can kind of tell that the artist deliberately didn't want to cover something and they kind of left it exposed, and it kind of affected the whole value system for them and creating that illusion of depth. So as much as it pains me sometimes, I still will paint in front of objects, but you really want to watch your negative space. I've accidentally just gone overboard with that, not watching my negative space, and I've realized that I've painted over something I really, really wanted to keep. So I'm always trying to be very mindful, kind of planning ahead and really watching that negative space to ensure that if I'm going to be creating any sort of layering and value, that I'm going to really want to plan out exactly what I'm willing to cover and what I'm wanting to kind of keep exposed. So in the last video, in episode 3, I used acrylic to bring in all this black, kind of large jungle tree, a lot of vines and everything. Of course, now I'm coming back with my oil paints on top of that, and I'm just bringing in some individual leafing. So I'm looking at trying to build in clumps of little leaf structures here and just painting in each individual one. So I've mixed a nice dark green blue color here, and I think I just used some phthalo green, yellow shade, and ultramarine blue. I may have even thrown a little bit of cerulean with that too, and that's kind of the color that I'm using, throwing a little bit of sap green in there as well, and keeping it really nice and dark. I want a lot of that just to stay very dark and be more in silhouette, because this is going to be pushing everything back. And I wanted a little bit of sunlight kind of bursting through little parts of our tree here. So I'm coming back with kind of a lime green color that I've mixed, which is really just the it's the phthalo yellow shade green, it's the Windsor lemon and the white primarily for the leaves. I've created a gold color using orange and yellow and white for the vines. And then I thought I'd paint in this little monkey here. So we got our little monkey poking out. He'll be mostly a silhouette. And then we'll just give him a nice little silver lining across his little back and his tail. And that will just sort of give the illusion that we've got this little monkey that's sitting here and he's just kind of checking everything out from this vantage point. So now it's going to be a matter of, I'm going to really start to work and focus my time for the rest of this painting into this primary foreground. This will be a very dark area as well. It's all in shadow. what you're going to see me do is I'm going to paint some of the tree or some of the leaves and some of the fronds, the different jungle plants. I'm going to paint them a little bit brighter than I normally would for a shadow area. And the reason I want to do that is when I get all of this undergrowth painted in, I'm going to come back, and you'll see me do this in a little bit. I'll come back with a glaze. I'm going to get my liquid. I'm going to use just Midnight Black. I'm going to mix them up in fairly equal parts, probably a little bit more on the black side, but I'm going to go through and I'm going to cover everything. And it's going to darken by several shades. It's going to darken all of these undergrowth plants, and that'll help me to create some layering. It's going to help to push it back, and then I can let that dry, and then on top of that I can come back again with another layer of more shrubbery, and that'll help to start to create a little bit of density on the floor of this jungle. And so I just wanted to explain the method behind the madness on why I'm doing this, because again, I'm going to paint these a little bit lighter to begin with, knowing that it's going to get more or less stained darker with a glaze and will cause these lighter colors to come back several shades darker. So now I just want to take a little time though and bring this in additional detail, and then we'll be ready to really start to move forward with the rest of the underpainting. This is just a little technique that I like. I really enjoy the glazes, and I've come to find that if you want to create the illusion of depth, that one of the best ways to do that is through using these glazes. And then on top of the glazes, when you come back with just the paint without any medium, maybe just a little bit of thinner, but really no medium, just bringing back the paint on top of that, it causes that primary paint that's going on top of the glaze to really create some interesting depth. So it's just a little bit of an illusion that I've come to find really is pretty handy. And I find it really handy when I paint trees as well. If you watch the video Destination's End, I've got a knight on a horseback, and he's standing in front of some large foreground trees, and that's a really good example of creating an illusion of depth that really pushes the darker, denser, deeper leaves and branches within the tree, that when you come and paint on top of that with just pure color, it can create that interesting illusion. So you might check that out. So now here, this is going to be a lot of just silhouette color. We're just going to keep it really nice and dark. We don't need to add too much detail here at this moment in time. But I'm just, again, trying to kind of create a little bit of layering and establish exactly what I'm trying to really figure out here on, I wanted a little bit of contrast. I need to get some really good contrast between lights and darks here. And so you'll see me jump around quite a bit here as I start to form different sorts of plants and leaves, mostly these kind of fronds that you would see in a tropical jungle. I have a little bit of flowers here. I wanted to bring a little bit more color to the painting, so I wanted to bring these flowers in because the painting is really it's really green, it's really olive, lots of yellows and tan colors, lots of those kind of earth tones. So I thought I need to bring in a little bit more color to the painting. That's why I'm bringing in these purple little flowers here in the foreground, just to kind of break things up. So that's really where my thought process was going as I was kind of watching what I was doing and creating. And I knew the painting was a very dark painting anyway. So I really kind of had to try to pre-plan that out a little bit. And now I can come back and kind of complete bringing these kind of this primary foreground into the midground, kind of joining them together, and using just my midnight black, I can kind of poke out little bits of different twigs and leaves and so forth here. That's going to be going in front of my cats, going in front of a lot of the stonework, and really start to push some things back. So I'm really thinking a lot about watching that negative space. Once again, I want to cover what I want to cover, but I don't want to cover the things that I intended to show, and I've got to think about that and make sure that I'm not going to be disappointed if I covered something up that was unintentional. Now from this point on, I can really start to hammer out bringing all the undergrowth in. It's going to be starting that layering process. I'm going to first paint in all these leaves, going to get them a little bit brighter than I intended to, and then we'll get that glaze coming through, and that'll go ahead and shift all that to a darker value and kind of stage us to be prepared to bring in the final shrubbery that'll really help to cause a lot of good density and thickness to our to the floor of this jungle. Kind of bringing a little bit of highlight color, so I'm just still staying with those blue greens, kind of adjusting the color slightly, adding a little bit more sap greens, a little bit more yellows into my greens, but just adding a little bit of variety and just changing up just a little bit on some of the leaves here. So this is now dried, and I've taken a day, let it dry, come back with that glaze, and here I am going completely over all of those little leaves and get things a little bit darker. And that's really the intent, just keep this really dark. A lot of it's going to be in silhouette. And now I've let that dry again. I've given it a couple hours. With that liquid, it dries really fast, so give it a couple hours. I can come back now, and now I can kind of begin to establish my final layer on top of that under layer, and I can highlight a little bit more, but these will be really subtle highlights since we're in the shadows, and I can just kind of come through here now and add a little bit more detail, kind of dress some things up a little bit more and improve some of the highlights a little bit here. Then I can come and bring in sort of the final little elements now. I'm just using that color right from the tube. I've added just a slight bit of mineral spirit to that just to get it to flow well. And just using my tiny little angle brush here now. I believe this brush is the one I use for pretty much everything on the floor now. But this is where I can start that real good layering process. I'm gonna watch the negative space because I want a lot of that dark undergrowth that I've already painted in to show through, but I want to put this strategically on top of those darker regions, and this will help to start to create that illusion that we've got a lot of good depth and density here. And this will cause some of that brighter color to kind of pop out a little bit more, but still staying true to keeping it the dark blue greens and just adding tiny little flecks of highlights here and there. And this is just a good little trick here that if you really want to create some interesting depth. Now maybe jumping back between my lights and my darks again, we're going to have some silhouetted little structures here in the foreground. So I can kind of jump in front of some of the highlights, and that'll create that contrast and create that layering process. And I'll just go back and forth between the highlights and the shadows. I've got my family bouncing around the house upstairs, so you're probably hearing that banging, and I apologize for that. It's not always easy to sneak away and record these voiceovers and have absolute silence with a big family. So that's kind of what you're probably hearing right now, some of that banging and bouncing around. Okay, and so one of the final things I've wanted to do with this painting is I just want some of that sunlight filtering through. We've got these little sunbursts hitting kind of around, kind of dotting around the canopy floor here. And so created this nice, bright, lime-colored green, and just to create a little bit more of that nice contrast. And that'll kind of help us to finish off bringing this drungal floor in. This is my final detail now, and I can do my little refinement stage and kind of improve, causing just certain things to kind of pop out a little bit better. And so this is how I'm going to kind of finish this off. So I appreciate you tuning in and appreciate you sharing with me in this 4-part series on our jungle ruin. And I think we're finally finished with this painting. So I really hope that these last 4 episodes have been very helpful for you on how I would put something fairly detailed, fairly complex, put together with both acrylic and oil paints. So looking forward to the next time that we can reconvene, that we can start a brand new painting. I hope you can join me for that. I look forward to it. Please subscribe if you've not already done so. Please share the video. Please click on your likes. I appreciate all that support. I appreciate all your comments. And I'll look forward to another video real soon. Thanks so much.